Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, and welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. I think there's still a urban legend or a myth regarding variable speed pumps that really needs to be dispelled. A lot of people still see them as just a really expensive pump that's no different than a single speed pump. So I'm going to unpack some of this here for you and maybe dispel some misthinking or some common myths about variable speed pumps. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro. I think one of the things that sparks a lot of debate is the price tag of a variable speed pump. I mean, are you getting what you're paying for? The extra money you pay for this thing, is it really going to save you money? Is it going to do what it says it's going to do? And that's one of the biggest things that I think a lot of the myths about variable speed pumps form around, is that, the price is really inflated, quote unquote. It used to be where you can get rebates from your electric company. I know my electric company here used to give rebates back maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I think all of those stopped for cost reasons, but there may be some rebates still available. You can check with your local electric company and see if they exist. Because of the price point also being higher than it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, is something also that people question, is why is the price increasing every year for these things? Are they just trying to gouge the consumer? And the real answer to that is that they're actually making the variable speed pumps much better, and they have new technology. They're also totally enclosed motors in most cases, which means they're going to last a lot longer. So there's kind of a built-in price point for the manufacturer, knowing that they're making a product that's going to last a lot longer, and there's not going to be a lot of replacements for these pumps, like the single speed pumps where you would replace it every 5 years or 4 years, or put a new motor on the back every 3 years in most cases. You're not going to have that kind of same parts consumption by the consumer, and therefore the price will be higher for that point as one of the aspects of the price point. The other one, of course, is that there's a lot of technology going in to the variable speed pump to make it work effectively. I think a good analogy would be just comparing cars out there towards VS pumps. So if you get a Tesla, it's going to have a lot of bells and whistles. There's like a light show with the Tesla when you hit the key fob. You also have like a video game console that's so advanced that you can use the steering wheel to like drive the go-karts in the video game. One thing they're lacking is a button for a gated community to open up the gate, which is kind of weird. I don't have a Tesla, by the way, but my neighbors do, and that's their one biggest complaint. But the technology in a Tesla is just amazing. And you're paying $55,000 for like a base model Tesla. And then if you get a Toyota Civic, which by the way probably has the buttons to open up the gate in your community, you're getting a lot less technology, of course. You have a combustion engine, and you're kind of downgrading for that reason. And the price point is maybe $20,000. I'm not even sure how much a Civic costs nowadays, but it's certainly not nearly as expensive as the Tesla. And that's kind of the same way you want to look at a variable speed pump. There's a drive on back that controls the speeds, RPMs or percentage. Different manufacturers are now putting it out there differently. But for the old school people, the RPMs were the revolutions per minute. And that's kind of how we calculate the speed of a variable speed pump. And that's where the money saving comes in. And I'll touch on that in a second when I talk further about the money savings. But basically, you're paying for technology, because that drive on the back of the pump is probably more expensive than the motor and more expensive than the entire pump in some cases to replace it. And that's where the technology is, and that's where the high cost comes in. Plus, the motor, again, is made better for the variable speed pumps, and they run a little differently than a single speed motor that you would get on a standard pump. All of this to say that the price point is there for a tech reason, and usually the price point reflects that depending on which brand you're buying, what total horsepower you're getting is going to be reflected in the price. So it could range anywhere from, $1,000 for an off-brand variable speed pump, all the way to $2,000 plus for, one with tons of bells and whistles made by a major manufacturer. And so, yes, they are rather expensive, and it may be one of those holy moly moments for the customer when you quote them the price of it. But just explain to them that they're buying a high piece of technology. And to be perfectly honest, this pump will last a lot longer than a single speed pump that you're going to be replacing every 3 or 4 years, the motor at least, and then the pump every 7 or 8, because the fact that they're running at a lower percentage, and there's some electronics inside there that are a little different. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but basically they're going to have a much longer lifespan because of the way they're built. And the analogy I like to use for the customers and make it really simple, and again, there's a lot of technology that goes into this, so I'm just minimizing it or making it simple, is that if you had a car and you drove it 80 miles an hour on the freeway all the time in the back roads, which of course is not realistic, but if you drove that car at the full speed with the engine revving, it would wear out that engine and motor pretty quickly. But if you drove that same car like your grandparents drive, going 40 miles an hour on the freeway and just driving it at 20 miles an hour in the back streets, ask your customer which engine you think is going to last a lot longer, the one that's driving 80 miles an hour all the time, or the one that's driving 40 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, maybe going up to 70 once in a while. Which motor will last longer? And chances are they're going to say, well, the one that's been driving slower. And that's kind of the same thing with the variable speed pump. Since you're not using the full 3450 RPMs, which is what the speed is of a single speed pump, you're actually making that pump last a lot longer. And the lifespan of that pump is something to consider in the price point. Again, I mentioned the manufacturer will pad the price based on the fact that you're not going to have to replace it. And that's one factor. And the other factor is that the customer can have peace of mind that once you put that variable speed pump in there, it's going to last a very long time. Depending on the brand again and the price you pay for it, usually equates to longevity. And I think the energy savings is something that you can really focus on with the customer. And I think this is the biggest selling point of the variable speed pump. It's hard to quantify it when you have an air conditioner going, you have your lights on, you have other utilities going, and everyone's power company is a little bit different. But my company here, Southern California Edison, used to do an energy survey for you. This was a few years ago. I'm not sure if they still do this, but they would send you a mailer, and then they would ask if you would want someone to come over and do an energy survey. And I had several customers on my route to do this energy survey, and they had single speed pumps back then. And believe it or not, Edison pointed out that their pool pump was actually producing or consuming more electricity than the air conditioner in their house and the refrigerator at their house. It was pretty amazing to see these reports that the single speed 1.5 or 2 horsepower pump was actually consuming more electricity than their air conditioner in the summer. So that gives you some idea of the amount of power consumption that the pump makes. And I do make a crude analogy where if you had a 2 horsepower pump, you're using 18 100 watt light bulbs every hour it's running. Of course, that's not considering the kilowatt hours or the tiered systems, but basically you can see that the amount of watts they're using really contributes to the electricity charge you're getting. A good example that you can let the customers know this also is that if you go to like Home Depot or Costco and buy one of those heat radiating lamps, you've seen them at the front of Costco. They look like a fan, but they're glowing orange because they're radiating heat. Well, those consume 1,000 watts every hour when you plug it in. And so if you're running 2 of those in your house, you have 2,000 watts of power being drawn for those. And I can almost guarantee you that your electricity bill will triple, maybe quadruple, if you're running 2 or 3 of these heat lamps in your house, because each hour they're running, they're consuming 1,000 watts of power. And you may be surprised that these use so much power. And I think customers are also surprised in the same respect that their little pool pump back there making a lot of noise is consuming so much electricity. So the variable speed pump will definitely save you money on electricity. And the way it works is that since you're running the variable speed pump on a lower RPM, and a lot of the pumps will have a screen that will display the amount of watts being used on there. Hayward and I think Jandy and Pentair, all of those have this on their screen, so that you can actually see how many watts are being used as the pool pump is running. And the 1,800 watts is not something that I made up. If you run your 2.7 horsepower VS pump at 3450 RPMs, you're going to see that you're consuming like 1800, 1600 watts every hour there. And if you're running that same pump at 1800 RPMs, which technically is half, but the way the watts are calculated and the way the pump actually works, because it's very efficient and effective, you're only using about 200 watts or 160 watts of power running that pump on half speed. So it's not like you're using 800 or 900 watts running it at half speed. You're using a fraction of the power running it at a half speed, which is something that is hard for people to kind of understand because there's nothing really to relate it to. But if you can take some screenshots for your customers of the VS pumps on your route, I would definitely take a screenshot of it running at 1800 RPMs and the wattage displayed on the screen, so the customer can actually see the fact that this pump is running at half the speed, but it's using 1/10 or 1/8 of the wattage. And this is a good way to show them how much money they're going to save. And then I would put it on a medium speed, 2400 RPMs. And this is a pretty good speed for most pools, maybe 2600 for some pools. And then take a picture of the screen so they can see that it's only generating like 400 or 300 watts of electricity running at a medium speed. And I think this will really convince them that, their pump running at full speed is costing them a lot of money on their electricity bill, and running a variable speed pump is going to save them a lot of money. And the way it works here in California, it may be different in your area, is that we're on a tiered system by Edison. Back in the day, it used to be 4 tiers, and then they realized that, hey, we can make more money by making it 3 tiers. And how the tier system works is that once you reach a certain level, the kilowatt hour rate will double, sometimes triple. And if you're using a lot of electricity overall in your house, refrigerator, air conditioner, pool pump, this will add to the total kilowatt hours being used in your house. And it's really easy in California to get from the first tier to the second tier and be in the third tier for 10 or 12 days that month. That means that at the beginning of the month, you're paying less for your electricity, but as you consume it the whole month, it keeps growing, or the bill keeps growing and escalating as you move from one tier to the next to the next. And with the variable speed pump, I can't guarantee that you're not going to move from tier 1 to 3 in the summer. I can guarantee you that it's going to be a lot less movement. For instance, you may cross tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 10 days into the month with the single speed pump. And with the variable speed pump, you may go all the way to nearly the end of the month without crossing into that third tier, if that makes sense, because you're using so much less power from that one appliance that it's going to really save you overall on your total electricity consumption. And on a tiered system, it may be just enough to keep you from paying $500 a month in electricity and from $500 to $300 with a variable speed pump. So the savings are going to vary, but if you look at the manufacturer's website, some say 80 to 90% in savings on your electricity bill, and that's really truthful and honest, but it's different how it's calculated with the overall use of all the appliances in your house. And so if you set the variable speed pump correctly, you can honestly tell your customer that in 2 years or less, you're going to actually make all the money back from the purchase of this pump. And this sounds like a sales pitch, and a lot of people are like, well, I mean, if that's the case, how do I see that happening? And again, I explained earlier that they can't really visually see it. They can actually see it if they were to check their bills and look at their kilowatt hours once they had the VS pump installed and see that it's actually lower. I have a blog article where I have my Edison bill before I had a VS pump and after, and you can clearly see the usage go down based on just running the variable speed pump versus a single speed pump. So they can quantify it if they wanted to look at their bill carefully. But you can honestly say to them that with the energy savings, they're going to actually pay for this pump over the course of 2 years. Once you set it correctly, however, you want to make sure you set a low speed and a medium speed and a high speed rarely so that you can maximize the savings with a variable speed pump. And it really truly does save money. And this is a point that you really need to hammer in on your customers with. It's one of those things that's kind of mandated by the government now with the EPA regulations. You can still get a single speed pump, and you can still get some pumps that are fairly decent as far as horsepower ratings that are single speed. But with the new regulations, I think most are going to have to put variable speed pumps in. And they're not a gimmick. They're not something that's overpriced that now that the government's kind of mandating it, that the government's pushing on them. And I know you're going to get a lot of pushback from people with that perspective. But in all reality, they're going to save money, and they actually are really good in a couple of other ways. And one of them is the technology will allow you to schedule your run times. And if you have certain pumps, depending on the manufacturer, you can stagger the speeds, you can stagger a lot of different things. You can set the runtime from your phone, from inside in the house. There's a lot of new technology that make these also very, very desirable. No longer we have to have an intermatic timer, which is like extremely old school technology. You don't have to go out to your pool and flip the switch on or make sure those little tabs are on there. It's one of those things where you're just coming into the 21st century just by having a variable speed pump, because you have all the controls in your phone or inside your house. So that's one benefit. Plus it communicates with automated systems. And so if you have an automated panel, having a variable speed pump is also a bonus because you have technology already, and then you're just upgrading that technology. And they're also extremely quiet. And this is something that's really important in California, where the pool equipment is usually right up against the house or near the neighbor's house. So the fact that they run extremely quiet is another big selling point. One thing you want to demonstrate is maybe record at one of your accounts a variable speed pump running on slow and then medium speed, so that the customer can hear it and be like, hey, can you hear this? Listen to this real quick. Put the phone up to them and see if they can even hear the pump running. And this is something that I think is really important to emphasize, is that with the new technology, with the fact that it's running at a lower speed, you could be having a pool party in the backyard. You could be running your pool pump to keep the swimming environment safe, and you won't even hear it back there. So it's one of those things where with a single speed pump, if it's right next to the pool or near where you're sitting, it's like sitting right next to your air conditioner condenser. It's really annoying, and it's something that a lot of homeowners just turn their pump off because it's too loud for their party, which may make the pool a little bit unsafe to swim in. You want that water circulating. So with the VS pump, you can leave it on and it's pretty quiet. And again, the technology of these things are amazing. You can change the speed of the pump for whatever situation you want. So if they have a spa, one question I get all the time is, well, how do I get the spa to have the bubbles like my old pump? I don't want to have to use my spa and not have any jets. You can put the variable speed pump up to the same speed as a single speed pump, even lower than that, and save electricity, and you'll have no problem with the spa producing the jets that you were looking for in the past. And it's one of those misnomers that it's not going to have the same power as a single speed pump. It's going to have, actually, in most cases, more power than your single speed pump based on the total horsepower. And it's going to be highly effective with your spa, with your water features. I would just explain to the customer that there's really nothing different about this pump and your old pump, except for the fact that it's a VS pump. Variable speed is the actual term, and therefore it'll run the pump at different speeds and percentages of power. And that's the only difference between this and your old pump. Of course, with the upgrades being totally enclosed, fan cooled, also having some technology so you can have your pool timers controlled by the pump, and also having the ability to save a tremendous amount of money on your electricity bill if the pump is set up correctly. I know there's some old school pool guys that are like, well, I just set it for the full speed all the time because I like having the pool running and the water clear, and it does a better job skimming. You'll have that group of people that they'll set the VS pumps really high and the customers won't see any savings. That's probably ruining it for the rest of us in some cases, but I understand why they're running it at full speed. You will have a few negatives with a VS pump, and I'll just run down those real quick here as I end so that you kind of know that all the positives I spoke of, there are a few negatives, and one of them is, of course, the pool surface may not look as clean running it at a low speed and medium speed than a single speed pump. So you may need a few things. You may need like the Skim Doctor 2.0 and the skimmer. You may want to invest in a solar surface skimmer. And of course, you have to let the customer know that the pool surface won't look nearly as good in a lot of cases, depending on how much debris, of course, falls in their pool, than what would look with a single speed pump running. However, the benefits on the energy savings outweigh that. And it's kind of dependent on the pool and kind of debris that falls in there. And there's, again, tricks you can do to kind of help that. You can get the pool skim and hook it up to a return jet, anything that would help that. And then, of course, there's the fact that the optimal automatic cleaner for a VS pump would be a robotic pool cleaner. And those are a little bit expensive also. You can run a suction cleaner and a pressure cleaner off of a VS pump. You just have to run it at a higher speed. And I think that's one thing that you have to explain to the customer is that with the automatic cleaner, it has to run at a higher speed at certain times of the day. So optically, it's going to be running at a medium to high speed sometimes to get the cleaner working. You're still saving plenty of money on your electricity bill. But of course, to get the maximum savings, you would want a dedicated robotic pool cleaner that runs separate from the equipment. And I think the last thing that you need to explain to the customer, and it's not really a negative, it's just a reality of them. If you're running the pump at half speed, obviously you're going to have to run it twice as long as if you're running a single speed at the full speed. So the pump is going to be running a lot longer each day than their single speed pump. If they're used to having their pump running 10 hours a day, the variable speed pump may be running 20 hours a day. Explain to them, of course, even though it's running longer, it's using less wattage. Show them those screenshots again of the pump and the wattage displayed on there. But really educate them that the pump's going to be running longer now that it's running at lower speeds. Don't worry about your electricity bill because the wattage is less, but they need to know that their pool pump definitely will be running longer than they're normally used to. And I did mention that the variable speed pump does help the pool service professional, and there's a lot of features of them that really help. You can actually be logged into your customer's account in a lot of cases and control the pump if you need to. I do that with my customers. You can also set a timeout mode to run it while you're cleaning the pool or circulating the chemicals. So you have more options than with an automatic timer. If you get to the pool and the pool's not running, put it in a timeout mode. You can run it for 3 or 4 hours. You can't really do that with an automatic timer with the little trippers on there. You'll have to move them or put an extra off tripper or on tripper on there. So it gives you much more flexibility with the pool care while you're at the pool. And I think selling the VS pumps are easy. Once you educate the customer, kind of debunk some of the myths they may be hearing out there. But in all honesty, you're really helping the customer out by giving them a device that's going to save them money on their pool care. And with the high cost of chemicals and the high cost of everything else, any money they can recapture and save is definitely going to make them happy. If you're looking for other podcasts I recorded, you can find them on my website. Just go to swimmingpoollearning.com, and on the banner, click on the podcast icon. That'll take you to a drop-down menu of podcasts I recorded. And with over 1,000 podcasts, you're sure to find something there to listen to. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro.